There is a book that was cast out of the Bible, a book so troubling that for centuries it was hidden away, condemned by councils, and very nearly lost to the world forever. And yet the men who wrote the New Testament knew it and quoted it. Its words are woven into Scripture itself, named openly in the letter of Jude near the very end of the Bible. It claims to reveal the names of the angels who fell from heaven, the monstrous giants they fathered upon the earth, and the forbidden knowledge that dragged the whole ancient world into ruin. It says mankind grew so violent and corrupt that God sent a great flood to wash the whole world clean and begin again. This is the Book of Enoch, and this is the story it tells. Long before the flood, in the first age of the world, when men lived for centuries and the earth was still young, there lived a man named Enoch. The book of Genesis says almost nothing about him. It records only that he was the seventh generation from Adam, and that, unlike every man before him, he walked with God. And then it leaves a single haunting line that has puzzled readers for thousands of years. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. He did not die like other men. He was simply taken. And that is all the Bible tells us. But this ancient book claims to be his own testimony, written down before the world was drowned. It begins in the days of his fathers, in an age when heaven and earth were still close to one another, and when something crossed the boundary that was never meant to be crossed. In those days, the book says, there were angels appointed to watch over the earth and its people. They were called the Watchers, and they observed mankind from the heavens above. 200 of them there were, mighty and shining, sent down from the presence of God to guard and to guide the children of men who lived below. But as they watched, year after year, they looked upon the daughters of men, and the beauty of mortal women stirred in them a desire they were never meant to feel. Their leader, an angel named Sinjaza, was afraid. He knew the enormity of the sin they longed to commit, and he knew that he alone would be blamed for it. So he gathered them and made them swear a terrible binding oath, that they would all descend together and all share the guilt as one, so that none of them could ever turn back. And so 200 angels came down out of heaven upon the summit of Mount Hermon, and by that oath they bound themselves forever to the earth and to its fate. From that moment they were watchers of heaven no longer. They had abandoned their place and their glory in the light. They had become the fallen. They took wives for themselves from among the women of the earth, and they began to teach mankind the hidden secrets of heaven, things that human beings were never meant to know. For heaven had always kept certain knowledge sealed away. Now that knowledge was loosed upon the world all at once, and it would change the whole course of humanity forever. Their leader Azazel taught men to work metal and to forge it in fire. He showed them how to hammer out swords, and knives, and all the cruel instruments of war. He taught them to beat out shields and armor for battle, and with these dark gifts he taught mankind the terrible art of killing one another. He taught the women to paint their faces and to darken their eyes, to wear bracelets and rings, and to adorn themselves with gold and glittering precious stones. Others among the fallen taught sorcery and the casting of spells, the reading of the stars and the signs of the moon, and the cutting of roots for poisons and for charms. Knowledge that God had meant to keep in heaven now spread across the whole earth like wildfire, and men grew clever, and proud, and increasingly cruel. With that knowledge came violence, and vanity, and endless bloodshed. Yet as terrible as all of this was, the very worst was still to come. For the unnatural union between angels and mortal women brought something into the world that should never, by any law of heaven or earth, have existed at all. The women conceived and bore children. But these were not ordinary children, and they did not stay small for long. They were giants. Beings of enormous size, part human and part something else entirely. They grew and grew to a height beyond anything mankind had ever seen or imagined. The Book of Enoch says they towered over the world like walking mountains, greater by far than any man who has ever lived before or since. At first the people of the earth labored to feed them, but the hunger of the giants was a bottomless thing, and it could never, ever be satisfied. They devoured everything the earth could produce, every harvest and every herd. And when at last there was nothing left, they turned upon the people themselves. They devoured flesh and drank blood, and they filled the whole earth with cruelty and terror. Nothing could stand against them, and the world groaned beneath their weight. And out of that suffering, ruined earth, a cry began to rise. The souls of the slain cried out, and their voices climbed all the way to the gates of heaven. There, in the highest heaven, for great archangels heard the cry of the earth ascending, and they turned to look down upon the world far below. Michael, and Gabriel, and Raphael, and Uriel gazed down from the courts of heaven upon the ruin and the horror that had overtaken all mankind. They saw the blood poured out upon the ground, and the lawlessness of the fallen watchers, and the unending suffering of the children of men. And together they carried the cry of the perishing world up before the throne of the Most High, the throne of blinding light and unquenchable fire. Look, they said, at what Azazel has done, who has taught all unrighteousness upon the earth. The souls of men cry out, and their plea has risen to the very gates of heaven. And from the throne, wrapped in a light too great for any eye to bear, the judgment of God at last came forth. First he sent word to a single righteous man named Noah, warning him quietly of a flood that was coming to cleanse the whole earth of its corruption. Then the judgment turned to the fallen, and first of all to Azazel, who had taught mankind the ways of ruin and drowned the world in violence. The archangel Raphael was commanded to bind Azazel hand and foot, and to cast him down out of the light into the outer darkness. He was hurled into a pit torn open in the desert, into jagged rock and total darkness, to remain in torment there until the great day of judgment at the end of the world. To the giants, God showed no mercy at all. He set them against one another, and they fell upon each other in war until they had destroyed themselves. And the watchers, their fathers, were made to stand and watch as their monstrous sons perished before their eyes, one by one, unable to save a single one. Then the fallen angels themselves were seized and bound beneath the hills and the valleys of the earth, dragged down and sealed away in darkness. There they would remain, imprisoned in the deep places of the world, for 70 generations, waiting in chains until the final judgment of all things. And then, at last, the waters came. The great flood rose and swept across the whole earth, and it washed the corrupted world entirely away, and the age of the giants was drowned and ended forever. But before the end came, the fallen watchers were seized with dread at the judgment awaiting them, and in their fear they turned to one man for help. They came to Enoch, the man who walked with God, and they begged him, the only one who might still be heard in heaven, to plead for their forgiveness. Enoch wrote out their petition and carried it up to lay it before heaven, but the answer that came back to him was final, and it would not be changed. There would be no peace for the watchers, and no pardon. They would never again ascend to the heaven they had abandoned, not for all eternity. And then Enoch himself was carried upward, taken up through the heavens to be shown the things that no living man had ever been permitted to see. He was shown the prison of the fallen stars, the disobedient hosts of heaven blazing and bound together in a terrible place at the very ends of the earth. He saw the storehouses of the winds and the snow, the mountains where the dead await their judgment, and a great fire in the west that burns and never comes to rest. And he was shown the judgment that is still to come, and the coming of a chosen one, the Son of Man, who would one day rise to set all things right. Enoch wrote down everything that he had seen, and he gave his testimony to his sons and to his sons' sons, before at last he was taken from the earth. For centuries afterward his book was read, copied, and treasured among the faithful. Even the writers of the New Testament knew it well and drew upon its words. The letter of Jude quotes Enoch by name, repeating his ancient warning of the judgment that he had seen coming upon the ungodly. And yet, as the years passed, the book was slowly pushed aside and left out of the canon of Scripture, until in the West it disappeared entirely for more than 1,000 years. It survived in only 2 places on earth, in the highland monasteries of Ethiopia, who never let it go, and in fragments hidden in clay jars in the caves above the Dead Sea. The Book of Enoch is not scripture for most of the world today, and much of what it describes can never be proven or disproven by anyone now living. But it endures, a haunting window into how the most ancient peoples explained the very origin of evil, and a warning that some knowledge was never meant to belong to us. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him, and the strange book he left behind, condemned and buried and forgotten, still refuses to stay buried.